This is Nan McKay, and I am excited to introduce you today to a woman with a very impressive bio. Elizabeth Glenn retired as the Deputy Director of Baltimore County Department of Planning and is currently the chair of the U.S. Africa Collaborative. Clearly, she retired to refire. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Liz, you're involved in so many initiatives. I really want to hear about all of them, but it seems like what you're doing is applying your housing and community development expertise throughout the globe, from Africa to UK to Belgium, Ecuador, Australia, China, France. So let's start with your current endeavor. So tell us about the U.S. Africa Collaborative. How did it get formed? What are the objectives? Those kinds of things.
Well, the collaborative grew out of relationships between like-minded individuals who had a passion for housing and human settlements. And through relationships, which are everything, we discussed the possibilities of really engaging housing professionals and academics and student leaders in a platform that would provide them with the opportunity to professionalize the housing and human settlement sectors in Africa, but also to bring an added dimension to the housing and human settlement sector here in the United States. And so the collaborative is a vehicle to do just that, to have conversations, to engage in research projects, global classrooms, and to convene the first Pan-African Symposium on Housing and Human Settlements to be held in Durban, South Africa in July of next year.
Well, that sounds exciting. Are you going to attend?
Absolutely, one way or another.
Tell us about the African Housing Professionals Forum.
Well, the African Housing Professionals Forum grew out of an idea by a gentleman in the United Kingdom who saw the need to bring housing professionals and engage them in discussion to professionalize, again, the housing sector. And so we have colleagues that are interim presidents for housing societies in 11 distinct countries that have all experienced challenges around housing and human settlement issues, both in the formal and the informal sectors. Countries like Somalia and Rwanda and Uganda, and our newest country in the globe, the South Sudan. We also have participants from Liberia and Kenya and Sierra Leone and Gambia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Africa, which is one of my heartfelt countries that I've had the pleasure to work with.
How did you get involved on a global basis? I mean, usually when you work in a housing authority, you do things within the United States, but you have just expanded that so much. Why did you do it, and how did you do it?
Well, first, let me just say that I've actually never worked for a housing authority per se, but I started out as a community organizer and found that, housing brings people together from all spectrums because it's interdimensional and it's also intersectional. But back in 1995, I was a participant with the National Congress of Neighborhood Women, and they invited me to help bring a grassroots perspective to the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 2. And they asked me to help convene a town meeting in Baltimore to bring grassroots women along with professionals together to talk about human settlements and to talk about what communities needed, particularly to empower women who in many ways keep communities together on a variety of levels, be it because of their children, because they care about the schools, because they care about the environment, because they care about safety, and they care about their role in society. And so that kind of got me the bug. After doing the town hall meeting, I was invited to go to Istanbul, Turkey, to participate in UN Habitat 2. And from there, it's been just one dizzying ride. I was working for an NGO at the time, and eventually I went to work for Baltimore County, and I kept getting involved in these international opportunities. I got involved with the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, and a mentor thought that I should be on the international committee. And so I got on the international committee, and the first thing that happened to me was I was invited to go to China and to spend a few weeks in China. And we went there focusing on housing and affordable housing, specifically in Shanghai and Hangzhou. And from there, it's just been great opportunities. I led a delegation to Australia. I then participated on behalf of NARO um, to go to the UN Habitat 3 conference, and I was part of the US official delegation. Actually, both times I was a part of the US official delegation. And that opportunity then led me to really experience issues around sustainability. And that was a new term for me as a houser. You know, I've been involved with housing policy and capacity building of nonprofit housing organizations. And as working in for Baltimore County, it was also about building community through housing programs. But here was a different dimension for me. And sustainability meant something much deeper than the community development terms I had been used to. And so it's really very intriguing, very illuminating, and really quite inspiring and quite grounding at the same time. And so that became the impetus for wanting to do more. The more I was exposed to an international sphere, the more I understand how connected the issues that we were all working on were. And that housing in itself is much broader than housing, because in order for people to be successful in housing and sustain housing, they really need employment, and they need to be healthy, and they need to have access to open space and recreational amenities. They need workforce development. They need access to infrastructure, transportation, because these things will keep them successful in their housing. And if they're successful in their housing, they will also maintain good health. And if they have good health, they can perform well at work and in school. The intersectionality of all these issues from a domestic perspective and an international perspective are quite intriguing to me. As a people person, I saw the opportunity to bring these places and these spaces together in a way that built a foundation towards cooperation, collaboration. And in the back of my head, here's our opportunity to change the world. We can build a better world for our children, for our grandchildren, and hopefully, we can influence the policymakers that determine how successful we can be ultimately through resource development and sharing, and policies that support people in the places where they live, work, and play.
And I don't think we have necessarily done that very well in this country. We get into silos a little bit. We have the silo of HUD, we have the silo of HHS, and we don't have a lot of back and forth. And that is really necessary, because if you're going to work with a total person, as you said, it's not just about housing. Anything you can do for what progress you think is being made in that area?
Well, one of the things I do also for NARO is I chair its Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. And part of our work has been the development of a housing equity platform, as we call it, an equity platform that looks at all of the intersectionality of these elements, like safety and security, housing, nutrition, finance, affordability, the whole gamut of successful and sustainable housing. And in that space, I see that disparity exists on so many different levels. And because we do operate in silos, we often don't hear each other. What I found is that once we start listening to each other and speaking with each other in a respectful, non-judgmental, and I dare say loving way, we began to open ourselves up to possibilities that we might not have ever considered. Including, how do you, develop a tenant management plan around respect for tenants and around the safety of the tenants. But also, how do we make sure that we're integrating and connecting our families to the greater community? And so that we're not so insulated, so isolated, and in a sense, excluded from the general society. So how do we do that? And the only way we do that is going back to the whole notion of relationships and being willing to develop relationships that are based on equity, inclusion, engagement, respect, dignity. And I think that to me are very powerful forces that hopefully in this so-called next phase of my life's journey, Um, I can help some in the influence of that, just getting people to talk to each other because there's so much we can learn from each other.
You're absolutely right. Three people I have interviewed, in fact, more as I start to think about it, that you might be interested in listening to or watching their video on our site. Have you ever met Richard Rothstein? He wrote The Color of Law, and he is still vitally interested and involved, as well as Tiffany Manuel is helping him. And the other person that I'm so impressed with what they have done to bring DEI and just the issues to the forefront is James Lowen, who wrote Lies My Teacher Told Me. Are you familiar with any of those people or have you met them?
I definitely have met Richard Rothstein. He was a plenary speaker for one of our NARO sessions at our Washington conference. It was virtual, but it was very powerful. He was also, he did a video called Segregated by Design. As part of my work with DEI and NARO, we launched something called Educate, Innovate, Elevate, Act. And it's a monthly series of content around the equity and inclusion space. We kicked it off with a 17-minute video from Mr. Rothstein called Segregated by Design. And then we brought in this brilliant young woman, Destiny Thomas from the West Coast, to talk about dignity in the planning space. Very exciting conversation. And the elements that were brought out in that about how we build spaces for people, and sometimes how we build spaces to corral and segregate them. And Mr. Rothstein, he, along with another gentleman, Antero Piatella, who wrote Not in My Neighborhood, a great sort of documentary reading on how Baltimore led the nation in the Restricted Land Areas Act and in 1910, and how unfortunately planning and land use in this country has been really focused on segregating people and segregating uses from each other, and rather than building more of a holistic organic approach to community. Very powerful themes in The Color of Law. And Mr. Rothstein is highly respected. And I find him, I think, brilliant in that, as housers, we need to learn more about land use because it's often the barrier and the roadblock that's put up to prevent us from developing the kind of communities that we know will be perfect for people. And that's where it's at, building communities for people, not for uses and not to separate them.
Very, very true. In doing all this work globally, can you sum up what you consider to be maybe your biggest passion?
Oh my gosh, my biggest passion is people. It's absolutely people. I'm inspired by their lives, their journey, their challenges, how they overcome and surmount barriers and the things that are put in our way. I mean, as a woman, as a Black woman, I've had to deal with a number of challenges throughout my life, starting with when I first went to college. And I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art, and to my dismay, I was told by a professor, well, you're a Black woman. The only thing you can do is sew clothes for people. You want to be a fashion designer? Oh, no, you'll never be a fashion designer. And, there was some truth to that. I'm not a fashion designer, but I am a people person. And I think an architect of bringing people together for principal purpose, for enlightenment, and for understanding. My new mantra is love, don't judge. And if we bring people together in that space, I think there's nothing that we can't do. Absolutely.
You mentioned the discouraging remarks that you had from that professor. What other adversity have you overcome personally that would help some of the women that might be struggling with those things today?
Well, that's a good question. And I thought about what I've had to overcome. And a lot of it has to do with what we look like. Well, not what we think about. And as a woman, I've been told too many times, even by my elders when I was growing up, that, I need to watch my mouth. I need to not be so outspoken. I need to act like a lady. I need to wait until someone tells me to speak. And I need to stay in my place. And When I was young, as a little colored girl, you need to understand that there are only certain things that you can do. And what I found out and what I taught my daughter is that you can do anything that you put your mind and heart to. But I constantly heard those messages, even as a professional in the planning department. When we were in a meeting and we were talking about mediation and fair housing, I had a leading executive, I won't say any names, say to me, well, I don't want to hear from you. I want to hear from the lawyers. And the lawyers are looking at him saying, well, she's the one who knows fair housing. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a woman. I've had people say to me, why do you wear your hair natural? Why don't you wear it straight? And I'm like, there's the key operative word, natural. What's wrong with being natural? And then I've had all kinds of conversations about my complexion, and it was quite interesting to me to have people come up to me and say, what is your background exactly? Who are your parents? I said, well, they're two Black people. Well, what's in your background? You've got that light complexion skin. So, I have no control. None of us have any control over the portal that we come into. I won't go into the vernacular, but we all come here. We all come here as we are. And let's try to figure out how we can accept each other as we are. Don't try to remake me. I'm also a short woman man. Let me tell you the barriers that short people have to deal with, like people will come, like knock me over or bump into me and say, oh, I didn't see you. I said, so now I'm invisible. I'm invisible. I'm a woman. I'm Black. I mean, oh my gosh, I'm short. What is this? And so, as they say, short people will overcompensate for their height. So that's why I have a voice. And I've learned to project that voice in a way to ensure that I'm going to be heard. And I've tried very hard in my life to be able to be articulate in a way that does not confuse people, but hopefully will inform them where I'm really coming from. And I believe strongly in the open heart, open mind framework, so that I'm not going to limit myself to my own beliefs, but make myself open and receptive to what others think. Not that I'm going to think like them, but it helps inform my own frame of reference. And if I can be open and tolerant, I think I do a better service to my community, to my family, to our global perspective. Because I know that ultimately, no matter what the boundaries say, what geographic borders we have, what bodies of ocean separate us, we are still the same. We are part of this organism called humanity, occupying the only home we've ever had, and that's planet Earth. How can we learn to respect and accept each other unconditionally without qualifications and limitations? That's my dream for our world, for our society, and for housing and human settlements, and the people that hopefully will come after me.
I think a lot of young Black women are still struggling with many things today. Not quite the same things. I mean, they're not told to speak when you're spoken to and that kind of thing, but still struggling. Tell us a story about the most important contribution that you've made to blaze trails for other women to follow so that they have some guidance.
Well, Nan, I have deliberately tried to mentor young women around their careers and to give them encouragement to be their authentic selves. And I've done that through professional efforts around equity, in the equity space and in the housing space, helping to groom young women and even older women in their profession, and to look at housing as a gift, a skill, a profession, but a way that they can improve society. They will also, I believe, dig into that wellspring of their selves, of their inner selves, and bring out their strengths. Because I believe when we use our voice for others, we will surely find our own voice for ourselves and be able to stand up even in an uncomfortable room, an uncomfortable setting, amongst people that may not look like you, think like you, or even like you, and to be your authentic self and to not be afraid to tell your truth. And so it's important for me to always try to work with young people. I have my own kids and family that I try to mentor on a professional level. But then I also have other students that I talk to and people who are just coming out of college because that's a very fragile time for them. They're not sure really what kind of job they're going to get. They're worried still about their student loans and will they be able to pay for them and how are they going to live independently? And if I can't do anything, I can at least give them encouragement that there are many obstacles that will be placed before you, but perseverance and being willing to believe in yourself will help you overcome those barriers and those obstacles and turn those challenges into opportunities.
As you have traveled around the globe, do you find that there are, other than housing, some common challenges that people are dealing with?
Oh, absolutely. Education is a big piece. And that's particularly important for women and girls because there are countries where education is illegal for girls. Until we are fully able to access education without barriers and restrictions and worry about costs, we will never really get girls and women educated to their full potential. And when we're not educating half of the population to its full potential, we are really impeding the progress of our world. So education is a big one for me. The other one is probably safety and violence against women. And, that is very real. And in too many countries, it's the unspoken issue. The Me Too movement has highlighted quite a bit here in the US, but we really still haven't been able to fully have that conversation about the safety and security that women, or insecurity that many women experience, even in their homes, in their communities, their place of work. Those are two big issues for me.
You have really left your mark around the world. When you think back, what do you hold dearest in everything that you have accomplished?
My family. That may sound trite, but it's not. My family is everything to me. They give me the support and the encouragement and the confidence to do what my heart leads me to do. If it wasn't for them, it would be I would be traveling in this world unaccompanied, as you might say, with hoping and thinking that maybe someone will listen to me. But because they've listened to me and given me confidence, it has really given me the encouragement to keep pushing and to keep working on building this platform for collaboration, for enlightenment. It's real important to me.
What would you say are the 3 takeaways that you would like people to have gotten from your interview?
I think it's probably the human connection, the power of human settlements and bringing professionals together in a meaningful way to create more resilient, sustainable communities, and finding your own voice and not being afraid to use it, because there is power in our thinking, our feeling. Women are often told not to show their emotions and not to be so emotional, but it's really our hearts and our emotions that nurture and care and give us the creative resourcefulness to make something out of nothing. And I think about that in the spirit of COVID, and how it's real hard. It has been real hard over the last 18 months to get a hug from strangers that could be your friends. And even in doing the international work, it was really at first kind of daunting to think about it. But then I realized that the pandemic gave me an opportunity through the virtual space to actually have more frequency in international connections. And through the power of Zoom, and trying to overcome time zone changes, to bring together a really eclectic group of people from the west coast of the US all the way to the east coast of Africa. And South Africa, I have to confess, has a really special place in my heart. Some part of that has to do with the fact that people lived under apartheid for so long, and that even right now, with the riots that have been going on in South Africa, they're still living under economic apartheid. That can be just as daunting and harmful as the enforced apartheid of restricting where you can live and move. But what an amazing place to be able to bring people together across the virtual space. And so taking advantage of what may seem to be a challenge, in fact, turned into a great opportunity. I'm inspired by what you do, for example. Your Trailblazers Impact podcast is such a powerful idea to bring these stories and people together with your audience. I hope to maybe emulate, because as they say, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but I hope to emulate your model and to start bringing some of those voices out of the continent and out of the US around housing and human settlements, and how we can both build a curricula that will support that, bring the academics out of their ivory towers, bring the practitioners together with the students so that they can be inspired and they can see what kinds of obstacles and challenges and opportunities they may have as they go forth in their career. But then to bring all these players together so that we ground the work that we're all doing in a way that's beneficial to our society and our community.
Well, you and I both feel very strongly that it is important to make a difference. It is important to try to do every little tiny thing that you can to put the wind beneath somebody else's wings. And to me, that's what it's all about. I've really enjoyed talking with you, Liz. It's been great. Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I think probably the one thing that I would love to add is that we should never be afraid to be truthful and honest and direct, even in the face of adversity. Even when the critics are saying, you're wrong, that's when you know you're onto something, that you are making a difference and that what you say matters. And to believe that the power of our hearts and our minds and being open to each other and recognizing our humanity openly and honestly is probably the most powerful thing that we can do. And if we all take the theory and philosophy of love, don't judge, we can go a whole lot farther. And as an old African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I just love it. Thank you so much for sharing with us your journey. And I just hope you just keep on going in those airplanes and having a great impact throughout the whole world.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.